Hello everyone, today is Friday, December 4th. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Gwynn. I don't have a beverage again with me today. I keep leaving it in the kitchen. I should go grab it, but we'll hop right in. If you looked at the title today, fairly dull topic, not the most interesting, not the most engaging, but it is something that I think is important to review, especially for those of you out there who may be looking at maybe starting to get in, maybe a retailer who hasn't really made the transition from in-store only to online sales yet. Maybe you're trying to do some research. You're looking at getting an eBay store set up, a TCG Player store set up, etc. Understanding your fees is something that's important. You want to make sure that you know exactly how much you're paying, how much you're going to be paying in fees per card before you do so, just so you're not paying more than what you intended, or you're in a position where you sold a card and then you realize that after all the fees were accounted for, you may actually be losing money. That's something that's come up before. So fees, not the most interesting, but it is important to talk about. So we'll hop right in. We'll just kind of do a breakdown. We'll look at fees that I have to deal with as a seller, and what kind of my pricing strategy, what I pay, and then how that affects how we do business. Most of these may or may not translate to you for your average retailer. I imagine a lot of these skills do transition over. A lot of the fees will be the same. So using this video as a general starting guideline is probably going to be something that's beneficial. So we'll hop right in. Accounting for fees, as mentioned, is important for your business because at the end of the day, these are things that you're paying for. This comes out of your pocket. You have to account for any item that you sell for. Some amount of money is getting lost. If you sell an item for $10, that's not $10 in your pocket. That's going to be some amount less. You have to account for the fees. If you're using a third-party platform, you're paying some amount to that platform in commission. Even if you use your own site, you're probably paying some on upkeep. That's not something I'll go into, because setting up your own website, there's a lot more nuance to that. You probably have to factor in the labor to maintain the website. If you're using something such as Shopify, it is a good e-commerce platform. You're paying a subscription fee on top of that, but you're not paying the third-party commission fees. There's a lot going on. Being able to account for these fees in each step of your business is really going to be a vital skill in making sure that you're not in a position where you may be potentially losing more money than you have to through these fees, and your transactions are going to be as profitable as often as possible. So the first fee we'll look at is fees that we generally pay across the board when it comes to e-commerce. Usually the two that are associated with this are transactional fees, so credit card processing fees, PayPal fees, etc. We usually see those tacked on to most purchases. And then shipping, this is what we pay to have items shipped across the country, across the globe. Most of these will probably be on top of every online transaction, so being able to have a critical understanding of these is really the first step. With credit card processing fees, anyone who's a retailer, you pay a fee every time you swipe a credit card. If you're a consumer, this may not be apparent to you. There are reasons why there are merchants that have a minimum purchase required. There are reasons why merchants will say, we don't accept American Express, we don't accept Discovery, we only take Visa and MasterCard, yada yada. There's reasons behind all this, and for the most part, the reason for this is there is a processing fee or a merchant service fee every time a credit card gets swiped. No matter where you are, no matter how big, how small, it doesn't matter if it's a local small business, it doesn't matter if it's a big box store like Walmart or Target. Every time a transaction is taking place, there is a processing fee for using a credit card or any sort of electronic payment online, whether you're accepting PayPal through your website, accepting credit cards, there is going to be that fee. It is the number that is most commonly quoted. This is the PayPal fee. This is what we usually see. It is 2.9% of the overall value of the sale plus a fixed fee. So on $1, it would 2.9% would be 2.9 cents, and then there's the fixed fee on top. With PayPal, it is usually 30 cents. This obviously varies by currency. If you're going to use an international currency, it is going to vary a little bit, but 2.9% plus 30 cents is going to be what you should expect for most transactions. That flat fee is usually what is going to make or break the deal on most smaller transactions. That is usually the most common reason why we see, if you've ever been to a small local business, a mom and pop shop, for example, this is why you may see signs that say minimum purchase of $5, $10, what have you, for a credit card purchase, because that flat fee transactionally adds up so much for smaller purchases. On $1, 2.9% is 2.9 cents plus 30 cents. That fee alone is 32.9 cents. That's almost 1/3 of your overall sell price on $1. It's if your cost of goods is roughly 50% or so, give or take, depending on what your item is, you're only seeing 15%. You're only seeing 15 cents on that $1 transaction. On a $100 transaction, 3.2%, 2.9%. Good lord, 2.9%, $2.9 plus 32 cents, $3.20. You're only losing about 3% overall to those credit card processing fees. Pretty much negligible at that point. Obviously, the bigger the purchase, the smaller that fee is going to account for your overall percentage of your sale, because that flat fee is really what is really a deal breaker on most smaller items. Anything less than about $10 or so, 30 cents is 3% of the overall transaction. So that's where it really adds up. There are ways around this. For most of us who are retailers, we're aware American Express, Discover, they do charge a higher swipe fee than Visa, MasterCard. That's why there are places that don't necessarily accept this. As a consumer, it is important to know what your retailers will accept. If you walk into a business and you purchase something and they have the stickers or they have the sign holders that say American Express accepted here, that means that that merchant is signed up with an American Express. They are required to accept your American Express card. You can't, if they don't have explicit signage that says we do not accept American Express, they are required to accept your American Express card. This is something that is important for you as a consumer. I've definitely been in positions where I've been into small mom and pop shops before. I see the sign and I think, okay, I'm okay to use my American Express card. And then I see people who are choosing to not accept it. In my mind, this is a pretty poor customer service experience. If you have it publicly viewable that you accept this, you should be accepting it. You don't really have that luxury. For the most part, most businesses do accept most cards. This is something that's just passed on to the business as a cost of doing business. This isn't really something for you to worry about. As a business, you should be aware of what you're accepting, of how you choose your payment processors, be aware of the fees. There are ways to negotiate lower fees. It can be based on volume. You can get a certain amount where the volume may be a little bit low. You can negotiate a lower fee. You can accept things. You can use Square. Square has a lower processing fee as well. There are definitely ways to get around this. You can use QR codes. Some of those have lower fees associated with them. For PayPal, I believe. There are all ways to get around this, but for the most part, you should just generally account for the 2.9% plus the 30 cents when using any place that accepts PayPal. So both TCG Player and eBay, they use PayPal as their payment processor. So you should be expected to be losing that 2.9% plus 30 cents just to start off. If you're a retailer and you're using credit card surcharges, you're trying to pass the fee, you're trying to pass the 2.9% plus 30 cents on. Be very careful. It does vary by jurisdiction. States have different laws on this. There are states where it is illegal, it's flat out illegal to charge that credit card surcharge. There are states where it is legal, but there may be rules and restrictions. A lot of places do require that any credit card surcharge be explicitly announced. The customer has to be aware that If I use a credit card, I'm going to be paying a surcharge on top. That surcharge, in some places, depending on the restriction, also needs to show up on your credit card, or not on your credit card, on your receipt. That way you can see that if I spent $100, if I swiped my credit card for $100, I was charged 3%. I was charged $3 as a credit card surcharge. That's something that does need to show up. Again, depending on the jurisdiction, some places do not allow for the surcharge, but they allow for a discount for paying via an alternate payment method. This is something that's legal in some states where they don't allow charging more for the credit card, but they do allow for a discount instead. These are all things to be aware of. Again, it does vary by jurisdiction. If you are a business that does do this, be very careful about how you approach it. Make sure that you are not breaking any potential laws by having that surcharge on top. Realistically, the easiest way to do this is to factor this small fee into your pricing. As a result, maybe there are things that you can't sell too cheap, because selling cheap things may not necessarily be profitable if they're buying exactly one cheap item. So that's why these are all things to factor into your business when you're trying to set prices on items. Again, the easiest way to kind of avoid this is to just assume every transaction you make, every time someone swipes a card, you will automatically be losing roughly 3 to 3.2%, give or take, on the fees alone. Moving onward, the nature of e-commerce, we have to ship things. The second thing that we really all have to deal with is shipping your items. When you sell something and you have to pay for shipping, there are certain retailers that do pass the cost of shipping onto the consumer. I think this is perfectly fine. This is one of those things that you don't want to be upfront about. TCG Player does have some shipping issues. A lot of sellers do choose to charge free shipping. That's how you're getting the maximum price per item. There is some downside because you may be having slightly fewer multi-item orders. As a result, multi-item means people purchasing more than one card from you. There are ways to get around this. That's a slightly different topic when it comes to setting up your business, but there are a lot of people who think that they can charge for shipping. They try and match an item price, and then they may be surprised when a customer who places multiple items are only charged for shipping once. This is a tactic as a consumer you can try and leverage against sellers that charge for shipping. Ideally, their model is centered around the fact that if you pay for exactly one item, if you buy exactly one item, you are paying for shipping and only on that item. If you're buying two items, you're only paying the shipping once, so you're basically getting a discount on the second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. items that you're buying past the first item. That may be a way to save money. It's just something to consider when doing this, but as a retailer, you should be factoring all these things in when you're pricing items online. For the most part, when it comes to shipping items, there are several ways to go about doing so. When it comes to trading cards and most small collectibles, the most basic version is using a PWE, a plain white envelope. I'm gonna make sure I hide my address here. So this is what it looks like. This is just a regular number 10 envelope. TCG invoices print out. They can be folded. They can be put inside this little slot. That way, you don't have to write any addresses. And the cost of this, as long as it's under 1 ounce, you can use a basic stamp from the post office. Right, what I have here are basic just stamps. These are forever stamps. 55 cents from the post office. This is good for up to 1 ounce. This is probably going to be how you ship most of your cheap orders most of the time on TCG Player and eBay, depending on what threshold of shipping you have set up. There are sellers, Card Kingdom, Star City, because you pay for shipping, you will always be receiving a tracked package, which is going to be the next thing I'm talking about. Track package. This is a bubble mailer. You've seen these before. This is a slightly larger bubble mailer than what most people use. There may be small ones you can use. Sizing really doesn't matter when it comes to that. First class, it should start out at $3.05 for anything under 4 ounces. So usually this will be enough for invoice, card, top loader, penny sleeve, team bag, etc. All those things will fit inside this. Will ship for less than 4 ounce. Starts at $3.05. The cost does go up a little bit based on how far they are located inside the U.S. I'm in Portland, Oregon. If I send something across the country to Florida, for example, it's going to cost a little bit more than that. Not really that much more. I think it caps out at $3.30, I want to say. But for tracking packages, this is kind of your go-to. Obviously, if you don't charge for shipping, it's not always feasible to be using a tracked package for every purchase, because if you're sending $10, it really doesn't make sense to be spending $3.30. That's roughly 33% of your cost just in the shipping alone. So usually you want things that do give you do want them on items that are a little bit more expensive. Probably it really depends. This is a topic of debate in some of the retailer groups. People always talk about what is the threshold I need to hold and wait until in order for it to be viable to use tracking. TCG Player says that anything at $49.99 and above does require tracking. Some people really push that limit. Right now, I'm at $39.99, but it is one of those things that I will play by ear. If it is a small package, if someone is ordering a bunch of $1 cards, if they order $41 cards, for example, that is probably heavy enough that I'm going to use tracking anyways. If it is one $39.99 card, I may use tracking, I may not. It really depends on the card itself. It's not really clear, but again, that is up to you. That is something that you have to determine for yourself, and how much that makes sense for your business in order to be paying that fee. How much risk are you willing to accept when sending out these packages? Because with a plain white envelope, with one of these, there's no tracking. You have no real protection as a seller. If a customer says that they didn't receive the package, you're on the line. It is your responsibility to ensure that whatever your customer is purchasing makes it to them. If they say they don't receive if they say that they didn't receive a package and you sent out via plain white envelope, you're on the line. You're going to have to refund them, resend out the order, etc. Just something to consider when it comes to shipping out items. So those are your kind of two basic options: the bubble mailer with tracking, plain white envelope without tracking. You have to figure out what the threshold makes sense for you to use one over the other. Moving onward, the next type of shipping we commonly see with the United States Postal Service is priority, USPS priority mail. There's a few different kinds. The beauty of these is these are all flat rate. Every item that is sent via USPS priority is a flat rate cost. You will pay the same amount. It doesn't matter if I'm sending down the street to my neighbor for some reason, or if I'm sending across the country to Florida. These flat rate envelopes are generally pretty good for things like booster boxes. For a small amount of collections, you can fit for example, this is a 200 count deck box. Depending on what it is, it very easily goes inside. There's some padding as well, so there's a little bit more insurance when it comes to this. This is insured at $50. So depending on what it is, you may or may not want to add additional insurance on top. But again, this is kind of a good catch-all. This is very good for shipping booster boxes. I don't have a booster box in front of me that I can really use. Just use this Japanese booster box that I have, so I can put this inside. Again, it fits inside nicely. You can do things such as folding it down to give it a little bit more insurance. Anything that goes inside this envelope that weighs less than 70 pounds will ship for $8.15 if you use online shipping. So it is pretty easy to ship a lot of this. You can ship, I believe, up to a 600 count box. It'll be kind of tight, and it'll kind of swell, but you can, as long as you can close a package, they will take this. This is used a fair amount for shipping just kind of these generic boxes. For smaller collections, this is kind of how you want to ship them. Moving upwards, there is this box. This is a small flat rate box. These are pretty narrow in use. But the things that I use this most often for, this is what it looks like in terms of size. If we these absolutely the best if you are selling graded cards. These go nicely inside. It does if you just put a little bubble wrap around this to make sure it doesn't really shift around. This is just a regular cardboard box. These are very, very good for shipping graded cards. They fit inside nicely, especially if a customer is just buying one. It's fairly big in space. You can probably stack you probably ship 8 cards in this or so comfortably with bubble wrap around them. This is a little narrow in terms of use. It doesn't really make sense to be shipping cards. It doesn't really make sense to be shipping this over something like this if you can help it. But because this is a little bit more sturdy, this is a little bit more rigid. It is much smaller than this. There is a limitation on how much you can put in here. So this is a little bit more narrow use. But for graded cards, this is generally my go-to. It is important to note that Priority only insures up to $50. So if you're using this for graded cards and you are shipping an expensive graded card, you may want to consider using insurance separately, paying for insurance separately on top of the $50 that comes with this. Moving upwards, there is a medium flat rate box. This small flat rate box, anything inside here ships for about $8.30. There's a medium flat rate box, which I actually don't have in front of me, and then you have a large flat rate box. These will kind of be your go-to for shipping booster boxes. You can ship a lot of bulk in these as well. There are ways to go about this. The medium box ships for $13.60. I have not used a large flat rate box in quite some time. This ships for, I think it's about $18.60, $18.80, somewhere in there. Someone may have to correct me if I'm wrong. Again, it's been quite a while since I used these. Most items, if they are booster boxes, again, as mentioned, very easy to ship in a padded envelope if you're just shipping one. If you're shipping a case, then you may want to use these. You have to kind of finagle them, do some Jenga, do some Tetris to get them to all fit. But these will kind of be your go-to depending on what size of items you're shipping. I want to say probably between your plain white envelope, bubble mailer, and padded envelope and medium flat rate box, it probably should account for, I want to say, over 99% of what you ship. If you're shipping a lot of booster boxes or a lot of booster box cases, then you do have to maybe increase it. But USPS, as a general rule of thumb, if you are shipping anything that weighs under a pound or anything that fits inside these flat rate items, there you go to. If you set up an account with USPS, you can actually have these various USPS priority items shipped directly to your door. Very easy. You just say, I want to order so many of these boxes, and give them a few days or so, up to a week, and they'll bring it right to your door. You don't even have to go to a post office to generate these. When it comes to shipping itself, you want to be using PayPal, multi-order shipping if you're a smaller seller, or if you want to pay for shipping in advance, you can use Stamps, Indicia, any sort of these programs that really help you cut down on the cost of shipping. There are ways to prepay for postage by doing this, so you do pay a little bit less than if you were to pack the items yourself and then go to the post office to ship them. When it comes to shipping, there are a few things there are a few nuances. Signature is a small fee that you can pay. For TCG Player, it is required for items over $249.99. This is something that I generally mirror as well when I sell through social media or other platforms. It is something, if I'm not selling on TCG Player does require it above that price. But for myself, I will always offer it to people. I know that a lot of people live in all sorts of different places. Not everyone has a secure porch. There are places where your mailman may just leave a box or a package on your porch out in the open. I know some people have to deal with package thieves. People aren't always at home to get their mail right away. Some people don't have a secure mailbox. Some people, the one I use, I have a locked mailbox that's shared with, I think, 15 other people, 15 of my neighbors in the surrounding area. So my mail is generally pretty secure, but not everyone has that luxury. And generally for purchases over $249, you probably want some level of insurance, and paying for signature confirmation is kind of a way to insure yourself against that. For insurance, I've talked about this in past episodes. I believe insurance is something that you as a seller should be paying rather than passing that cost on to the customer. I see a lot of poor behavior when it comes to this. I think the seller trying to pass that cost on to the buyer is poor practice. As a seller, it is your responsibility to ensure that the item that you sell is getting to your paying customer. If you don't choose to get insurance, that's on you. And that's really the purpose of insurance. Insurance is for your protection as a seller, to ensure that if something goes wrong when the package leaves your hand at the post office, you're insured against it. And there's any multitude of these. Theft at the post office is an issue. Water damage. We're in winter, so a lot of places rain. I've definitely gotten water-soaked packages before. I've gotten various flat rate boxes. They were clearly sitting in the package out in the rain or something that were soaked through, which caused water damage to the contents inside. These are all things that, by buying insurance, you're able to insure yourself against. If there's any issues, the larger and more expensive the item, the more reason there is to insure it. Does it come out of your bottom line? Yes. These are all things you should be taking into account when you are selling. You should be pricing accordingly. If you're going to sell something for $1,000, maybe you want to sell it at $1,050, for example, just to give you that little buffer so that those $50 can account for insurance, can account for fees, etc., and you're doing what you can to protect yourself as a seller. Insurance is one of those things that scales up. So every X dollars of insurance you want to buy, it will cost you a certain amount. I can't remember. It's been a fairly decent amount of time since I've had to ship something. Usually they're to people either I trust, and I don't have to deal with insurance, or usually it's not worth enough. Or if the deal is big enough, I've definitely done in-person deals before where I took the liberty to fly directly to them to have it picked up instead of having it shipped via USPS, what have you. For bigger items, it is important to note that UPS and FedEx are shipping options. Generally, the only times I really use them are when I'm shipping a large product. So if I'm shipping multiple cases, then things will go out via UPS Ground or FedEx, for example. It is much more affordable to do so than trying to break up a bunch of items and ship them in a bunch of flat rate boxes. Usually if you have one big box that's going to weigh 10, 20, 30 pounds, for example, because of multiple booster box cases, what have you, shipping via UPS Ground is going to be your most affordable option. Again, this isn't something that comes up very often. Maybe this is something for you if you're a seller who does big volume deals, a retailer that has a lot of booster cases, and you send out a lot of booster cases. Most of the time, not really going to be a relevant thing. For people who are looking to sell out of their collection, and maybe you have someone that is going to buy your entire sealed collection, for example, it's going to be pretty heavy. You're going to want to find a big enough box to ship it all in, and then just package it up and drop it off at UPS and send it via UPS Ground. That is realistically going to be your most affordable option. That really summarizes the basics of the fees that you will always be experiencing as a seller. PayPal/credit card processing fees and shipping fees. Those are two that you should be fairly familiar with and take into account whenever you're shipping items. The next few things we'll talk about, I'll just do a very brief and quick rundown on the different platforms that we most commonly use. Yes, there are other platforms out there that I'm not going to cover. You just want to be aware that these are things that there are different platforms that people use. People use all sorts of platforms. TCG Player, eBay, StockX. These are three that I'll cover today. But I'm aware that there are other platforms. Amazon, usually the most common one. Fees really do vary. So do research for yourself before you jump in. But with TCG Player, eBay, StockX, I'll break them down just very quickly. TCG Player, your fees do vary. And the basis of this is that depending on what type of account you use, you'll pay a different fee. Your most basic account that probably the majority of sellers on TCG Player use will be paying a 10.25% commission on the value of the card sold plus the payment processing fee. So that's 10.25% plus the 2.9% for PayPal plus the 30 cents of the flat fee that's on top of that. A general good guideline is you're probably paying 13 to 15%. 15 is kind of the nice round number that people use when it comes to selling, when it comes to what you net after selling something. That's just kind of what people go off of. So it does scale up a little bit for people that use a pro account that have that level. For people who use tools like mass pricing, for example, there's an additional 2.5% fee on top. And then if you have direct, there's another fee associated with that. These are all things that really do vary. Obviously, if you're going to be a direct seller, if you're going to be a pro seller, you probably already have these figured out. You can calculate this into your prices, factor these into your prices when you're selling. Those fees are a little bit higher. You do pay for a slightly different service. I don't choose to use a pro account. I don't choose to use the direct account. I'm not a fan of paying the higher fees. A lot of the legwork that makes sense for me in my business, I do myself. So I just use a basic account and just use the 10.25% plus the payment processing fees that comes out for my TCG Player sales. If you use Crystal Commerce, I'm sure you're aware of it. For any sort of third-party syncing, there's an additional fee that comes with using Crystal Commerce. There's both a subscription fee that you pay a certain amount on top of using fees per sale for Crystal Commerce. That's something you should be aware of. The commission fee is capped at $50. So this comes for selling high items, high-end items. For selling power, dual lands, etc. Most of these things are capped. Dual lands probably wouldn't cap unless you're selling a very like a beta or an alpha one. So there's a cap on that. That cap is nice. It is much lower than eBay's cap. eBay's cap is I believe $750 that you can pay up to, but more likely TCG Player, not the marketplace where you're going to be trying to sell your high-end graded cards for Pokemon. For Pokemon, most people turn to eBay for those. You see lots of eBay listings for PSA, BGS, graded cards. That's really your go-to. TCG Player does offer that functionality, but I think generally TCG Player is the place where you just want to have your, run-of-the-mill items that will sell most constantly, not necessarily looking for vintage cards, legacy cards, high-end cards. You just won't be selling your $1 to $50 items. Those are probably going to, I imagine those probably count for the majority of the traffic on TCG Player. On TCG Player, it's important to note that if you sell sealed product, there is a higher fee associated with that. That's just something to be aware of. I don't sell sealed product on TCG Player. I don't know that number off the top of my head. I actually didn't even think to do research on it until just now, where I was looking at some booster boxes. Usually selling booster boxes through TCG Player, not the best platform, mainly because especially on newer products, especially on things like Zendikar Rising, Commander Legends, Vivid Voltage, usually it's going to be a race to the bottom very quickly. People are going to be really fighting each other, trying to undercut each other to sell, and especially when people are selling, people aren't just listing one booster box. People aren't just listing one booster pack. People are listing hundreds of booster packs and tens, dozens, 50 or so booster boxes. So it generally becomes a race to the bottom very quickly. Selling sealed product on TCG Player is not really something that's advisable. I've definitely never done it before. The fees are just too high in order to make it profitable, especially when you account shipping on top of that. The type of fees you want to pay really determines what kind of mileage you get out of TCG Player. As mentioned, there are people that use Pro but not Direct. There are people that use Direct, not Pro. There are people that use both. There are people that use none of the above. Depending on how you structure your business, depending on the amount of labor you have, depending on the amount of inventory you have, depending on the sheer number of cards you have, all these things are worth considering. That's not really something I want to go into this, to talk about today, mainly because it does really require a separate video of its own to understand the nuances, understand the benefits of Direct, to understand the benefits of Pro. There are business models, there are places where these will work for them. It just happens that my business, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't really make sense for me to be using some of these tools. But if you're out there and you're a retailer, you have the volume, you have the infrastructure, you have the staff to do this, by all means, use Direct, use Pro. Just be aware that you are paying more than someone like myself who doesn't use any of these additional functions for TCG Player. Moving on to eBay. eBay is fairly straightforward. There are basically two types of fees that you generally will use. You have an insertion fee. That's what eBay calls it, more commonly known as a listing fee. Every item you list will cost you some amount of money. For most people who are just listing a small number of items, this isn't really something they have to concern about. If you list less than 200 items a month, I believe that's the number, eBay will just give you those 200 items for free. There's no listing fee associated with them. But if you start having a store, if you are listing a lot of items on eBay, then you have to start considering what you want to be paying, how many items you list. You can get a store, an eBay store, and that will actually raise the number of items you're allowed to list per month without hitting that threshold where you will start paying an insertion fee per item after that. Fairly straightforward. Obviously, you don't need to get the highest tier store. If you're a relatively small store that maybe is only listing 300 to 500 items a month, these are all things to consider when creating your eBay store. I don't need much more than 200. I think I just have the most basic eBay store. Above that, I actually haven't messed with it in quite some time. So that's just something for me to consider, something for you to consider as well if you start selling. For most people who are just a small individual business, 200 items probably going to be good enough for most people. Maybe a basic eBay store just to kind of get over that threshold if you need it. The fee that eBay collects its money from most commonly, in addition to the payment processing fee, is the final value fee. And this fee, like every auctioneer out there, every auction website, is the fee they're going to take based on the value of the item you sell. For most items, for most things that we will be selling, the final value fee is going to be 10%. If you sell an item for $10, eBay is going to take $1 from that. All the way up to $750. This is obviously, we're not going to hit this until we're selling very, very, very high-end items, at which point there may be other avenues to use it. This final value fee, this is something that we do have to consider. Factors into your pricing. If you sell an item for $10, you're losing $1. Maybe if you're trying to get as close to $10 as possible before shipping, maybe price at $11. Just something to consider. There are some items that will have a higher fee or a separate fee structure than the 10%, but when it comes to most things we sell, booster boxes, trading cards, etc., basically going to be paying that 10%. StockX, slightly different. StockX is, it starts out at 9.5%. StockX is generally where people go to be selling shoes, sneakers. Most commonly you see those on there, but due to how many people have been flipping, you have a lot of flippers that use StockX. From my experience, most of these people are just trying to buy items at stores. These are people that are buying PS5s. These are people that are buying Champions Path Elite Trainer boxes, etc. All these things are available on StockX. And as a seller, if you do choose to go that way, it is a little bit more seller friendly in my opinion compared to some of the other sites. It doesn't require necessarily a lot of knowledge, which is why it's so prevalent among flippers. Flippers don't actually need to know what they're buying. They don't actually need to have any knowledge regarding Champions Path Elite Trainer boxes, for example. They just know that there's a markup on this. They can go to StockX. They can sell it very quickly. The fees fairly straightforward. It starts out at 9.5% for your basic seller level. At level 1, there's 4 levels, 2, 3, and 4. And each seller level you go up, your fees go down by 0.5%. So 9.5% to start for level 1, 9 for level 2, 8.5% for level 3, and then 8.0% for level 4. Fairly straightforward, plus the 3% processing fees. There's something to note. There's a few items that have a slightly different fee structure. Handbags and watches have a flat fee associated with them, regardless of what seller level you are. It doesn't matter if you're level 1 or level 4. Different fee structures there for those two items, and I believe Funko Pops also have a flat fee structure associated with them as well. Just something to consider. If you've never used StockX before, I would recommend checking it out. It is something to be aware of. I think they're slowly starting to get into the trading card market. Back before trading cards really took off, there was no option for trading cards on StockX. Now there is. It's not just for people wanting to buy handbags, watches, consumer electronics, sneakers anymore. They've really expanded their scope on what they sell. Funko Pops are on there. Collectibles are on there. So trading cards is definitely a place to get Pokemon cards. That's something that's available. I would recommend checking it out. It is definitely a neat website to use. I personally have not done any selling myself. I've been very close. I do have sneakers that if I ever want to get rid of. StockX is kind of my go-to as a way to easily look and see what the prices are, what I can get, and then if I want to sell them, it's very, very easy to do so based on their ask and bid system. If you're interested in that, do a little research, play around the website. It is very intuitive, very straightforward, very simple to use. So if you're looking to just make a little extra income and move things quickly that way, definitely check them out. That's something I've been meaning to do more. I just haven't really had the need or opportunity to jump directly onto their platform yet. So that'll be kind of a wrap on today's episode. These are really, I think, for the majority of the people out there, for the majority of retailers, unless you're really a power seller who's looking to use all sorts of platforms such as Amazon, or you're using the kind of the highest tier of TCG Player, what they have to offer in terms of using both Pro and Direct, I think the contents of today's video really should cover most of what you as a starting out seller, or maybe a retail business operation that is looking to transition into online sales. The majority of this here should cover most of that. For realistically, for me, because I don't sell on StockX yet, TCG Player, eBay, those are the majority of the fees I deal with, and I've largely been able to figure out the pricing structure that works for me, what price I want to sell cards at, and what price I want to sell things at, to make sure that I'm getting the return I want after I account for payment, third-party platform fees, and shipping fees. So with that, I hope this does help people out there. If people need help on something, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer questions or explain how I do certain things, just as a way to help you get off the ground if this, doing some of these are unfamiliar to you. Always happy to answer those questions. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion PDX on the right. As always, where you're in the world, stay safe. Have a good weekend. We'll be back next week with more. Thanks again for listening.